Raised panels enhance any woodworking project, and arched raised panels add an even more distinctive flair. These panels don't have to be limited to doors or reserved just for kitchens or bathrooms. They work well in bookcases and look great on entertainment centers. Raised panels also add a professional touch to desks and decorate fireplaces beautifully.
Today we're going to show you how to make 5 different arched raised panel doors. This one right here is our cathedral arched raised panel. We have another one right here which is called our country arched raised panel. Our third one is our French raised panel. The fourth edition is our Somerset arched raised panel. My favorite is the Roman arched raised panel. And this is the one that we're going to be building today. So let's get started. This is the door we're going to be building today, the Roman arched raised panel door. And in our catalog, it covers all the dimensioning of this door, which you can read about. But today, what I'm going to do is cover the parts of the door and how we arrive at all that dimensioning. The 5 parts of the arched raised panel door are right here. These 2 upright pieces are called the stiles. The bottom and the top piece are called rails. We refer to this as the bottom rail. This here is the top rail. And of course, the piece in the middle right here is our raised panel. Now, how do we arrive at the dimensioning of all these pieces? What we do is we always make our stiles in our bottom rail 2.5 inches wide. And I'll explain why later. But if our door is to be 20 inches long, we're going to cut this piece 2.5 by 20, and this stile 2.5 by 20. So we're going to make our stiles 2.5 inches wide and 20 inches long, because the door is 20 inches. How are we going to arrive at the length of our rails? Well, we're going to arrive at the length of our rails by determining the length or the width of the door, and we're going to be subtracting the 2 stiles here. But we're not going to be subtracting 2.5 and 2.5 because we have a cutter here that's going to be cutting right here the cope cuts. You can see that right there. And our cope cuts, our bits cut a 1/2 inch deep here, 1/2 inch engagement. Most people's cutters only cut 3/8 or 7/16. We go a true 1/2 inch. It makes a lot stronger door, and it cuts just like a shaper. So what we're doing here is when we put this door together, we're losing a 1/2 inch, we're losing a 1/2 inch. That leaves me with 2 inches right here and 2 inches here, which is 4 inches. Well, that's our magic number, 4 inches. So if our door is 12 inches, all I do is subtract 4, and I know the length of my rail is 8 inches, both on the bottom and on the top. Okay? So we've got the length and the width of our stiles. We've got the width and the length of our bottom rail. Now, the top rail, we're going to make that 8 inches, but how wide? In the catalog, when you're doing an arch door, you always start out with 4 1/4, and we'll make the arch. But at the narrowest point of the arch, those templates that we're going to be using later are going to give you a 2.5 inch reveal here. So we have a 2.5 inch reveal everywhere. So we know how big all these pieces are now. The middle piece is our last piece, the raised panel. If our rail is 8 inches, this panel is going to be 7 3/4. We're going to subtract 1/4 inch on the width. Why? Because we want that panel to expand and contract inside that door. We want room for it. I also leave this part going up and down here. We want this 20 inches right here. Well, we're going to subtract that magic number of 4 to arrive at 16. But we're still going to, again, subtract 1/4 inch. And the 1/4 inch on the width right here is for expansion and contraction of the joint, okay? But on the top and the bottom, we don't have to take that 1/4 inch off for expansion and contraction. What we're doing there is leaving the same reveal all the way around. And how are we going to keep that panel from rattling and shaking in there? Because it's narrower? Well, inside of our door, we have these little panel line strips. 2 of them are right here. We got 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. They position that panel, they keep that panel centered at all times. and they also let that panel expand and contract evenly. The next thing we're going to be doing now is we're going to be coming in here and cutting the cope cuts on our top rail up here and our bottom rail down here. This is the 6-piece cabinet making set we're going to be using today to build our arched raised panel door. The first bit we're going to use out of our set today is the cope cutter. And that cope cutting bit is going to be cutting the end grain on our top rail and the end grain on our bottom rail. Okay? First thing we have to do is set this bit into our router and snug it up with our bent wrench. Okay, the next thing we need to do is put the insert ring in. The insert ring drops in right like this, and what we do next is pivot that ring with our spanner wrench to lock it in so that can't come out. Now, what we have to do next is set the height of that bit. And we're going to set the height of that bit with a new little jig called the Easy Set. And the Easy Set will set 8 different router bits for us. At any height of wood we have, it's going to set that bit. Anywhere from 3/4 all the way up to 1 1/8. Okay? And the way that works, we're going to dial it in. The thickness of this wood is 13/16. So we're going to start at the star here at the beginning, and we're going to go to 13/16 right there. And that's our cope cutter. And we're going to set that cope cutter up right like this. And you can see how this thing works. As I revolve it, it comes up any thickness. Okay? So we're going to come down to 13/16 and set that bit. Well, this is our router raiser. It comes into here. What that does, it raises and lowers the bit. Okay? So we're going to take this. We got it set for 13/16. We're going to bring it into here. And I want to raise that bit up so that we are setting right perfect right there. We've got it set to the right height. We lock our router in position, and we're ready to start machining. Okay. Our fence is a pivoting fence. The fence drops into our pivot hole, and you can see how our fence is going to pivot. What we do is take a straight edge on that bearing, pivot our fence flush with the bearing, lock it down, and we're ready to start cutting. Now, we're going to take our top rail and our bottom rail, and we're going to run them through with a push block. And this push block here does 2 things. It keeps that board square to the fence, and it also prevents chip out at the back of the cut. Put my glasses on, and we'll make our cut. Okay, you can see with that backer board in there now, we have no chip out occurring right in here. No chip out at all with that backer board. And this is a handy little backer board that I made, a little push block. I took a push block and screwed it to a piece of square stock, and it works just great for creating those nice cuts. Okay, we've got our cope cuts made. Both cope cuts are made in the bottom rail, and both cope cuts are made in the top rail. Now, we're ready to start to create that arch in our top rail next. Okay, we're ready to take and cut that arch in the top of that rail. To do that, we're going to use our Roman set of templates here. And the templates come in different sizes. You can see they come up in 1-inch increments. Okay, we're starting with 9.5, 10.5. They go up in 1-inch increments this way, all the way up to a 22-inch wide door. Well, the door we're going to be building today is going to be a 12-inch wide door. So I'm going to use the template that says on the front right here, 11.5, 12.5. All of our templates have a center point. We're going to line that center point up with the center line that I've already found in my rail. Okay, to do that, we're going to take that template, line it up in the center with the top edge of the door. Now, I'm going to nail that template to my rail. When I do that, those nail holes aren't going to show because they're going to be hidden inside the glue joint. What we're going to do first is we're going to take it to our bandsaw and we're just going to rough cut this to within about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. Then we're going to come back, stick our flush trimming bit in there and flush trim this and get it perfect. We just got through cutting our top rail on our bandsaw. Now we're ready to change bits and put the next bit in our set, which is our flush trimming bit right here. And the flush trimming bit you see has a bearing on the top, and that bearing is going to ride on my template right here and flush trim this rail exactly to the right thickness and design as this template. So we're going to change bits and stick the flush trimmer in. Now, this is a beautiful thing about our router bit set, all of my sets in fact. And when we change bits, this is the key. This is what makes our bits different than anybody else's right here. Changing this bit, of course, we have our bent wrench. We're going to come into here with our left hand, push in on our spindle lock, and take this bit out. Now, here's the thing about our bits. Once you have that first bit set, that's it. You never have to change the position or the height of your router bit anymore, because all of our other bits are machined exactly to that perfect height so that you can swip from one to the next without moving the height of the router. That's a big feature, we think. Now, to do that, we're going to take the next bit, drop it in, and we're ready to go. Now, you're not supposed to do that, because when you tighten up with that router bit now, that bit should have the capability of being sucked down in the collet to get tight. And if I bottom that bit out, I can't do that. Everybody says, bring that bit in, move it up about 1/8 or 1/4. Well, what we do at the bottom of our router bit, we stick this little rubber collet down there, this little rubber grommet. When we stick that bit on our rubber grommet, you can almost see my bit bounce. What we do now is when we tighten up that bit compresses against that rubber grommet, and that's how I create all the exact cuts that we're going to be creating today. So we've got that bit set. We're ready to put our insert ring in here again and make our cuts. Now, we'll come into here. We're ready to cut. The small bit like this, the smaller the bit, the faster you can run a smaller diameter bit. So we're going to turn the speed up high as we can. Come into here. Now the bearing is going to hit. You can see what we're doing there. On the bearing and right there. Okay, and you can see we made that rail the same shape as that template. Now, we got to do the same thing with our panel, but we're going to use the raised panel template. That has a center point also, and that center line is going to be lined up with the center line we've already found on our panel. We take this template on now, line it up, and get it as close to the top edge as we can with the center, and you'll want to put a square on here, square that up right like that. Now, you can see that we're placing the nail holes out to the outer edge where we're going to cut our raised panel. So we're just going to tack that in there just a little bit, right like that. We just want to prevent this thing from turning. That way, those nail holes are going to be machined out later when we cut our raised panel. But now, we got to take this over to our bandsaw again, and we're going to trim this edge off just within 1/8 or 1/4 again so we can come back and use our flush trimming bit and flush trim it. Okay, we've got this cut on our bandsaw to within 1/8 or 1/4. Now we're going to come into here and flush trim it. When we start flush trimming, we want to make contact with that bearing out here away from the wood and then edge it into there. All right, we've got that panel cut to the same shape as that template. Now, we're ready to stick this panel into our top rail right here to create our arched raised panel. But the next thing we have to do next is cut the pattern cut on the top of this rail like we have right here. So that's our next step. We're going to take and cut the pattern cut with our pattern cutting bit in our top rail. Okay, we're ready to make our pattern cut here now, so we're going to take our flush trimming bit out and use the next bit in our set, which is our pattern cutting bit. That's the bit with the bearing on the top. Drop it in on our rubber grommet, snug it up, we're ready to go. Take our insert ring, secure it, and we're ready to make our pattern cut. Okay? In creating that pattern cut now, again, same thing as we were flush trimming. We want to dial the speed down. We have a little bit bigger diameter router bit, so we're going to dial the speed down to around 12 or 14,000 RPMs. Okay? So we'll come into here on the bearing. See what we're doing on the bearing. Okay, we just made this pattern cut right here. Now we got to make that same pattern cut going down our two stiles in our bottom rail. But what we're doing there, we're going straight again. So we're going to take our two stiles in our bottom rail and we're going to cut the pattern cut going straight. So we're going to move our fence in position to do that. Our pivot pin drops into our hole. We're going to take our straight edge right here on the bearing, pivot that fence flush with the bearing, lock it down, and we're ready to cut. Now, remember, always put the good side down. On all of my sets, you're always putting the good side down. We're going to put the good side down, use our push block here, and guide it through. Okay, we've got all our pieces cut now. This is our one stile. Here's our bottom rail fitting in right here. Here's our other stile fitting right in here. And we've got our top rail done too. And we don't have to use that. We're done with that template so we can take it off. And the beautiful thing about this is you can use these templates over thousands and thousands of times. They're never going to wear out. Okay, what we have next here now is our top rail fitting right into here. And what we have is all four pieces of our door. The next thing we have to do is make that panel to fit in the middle. And we have that panel made already to the right size and shape. We just have to raise that panel to fit inside of our stiles and rails. And that's what we're going to be doing next. Okay, we're ready to raise the panel on our center portion here, on our raised panel. To do that, we don't need the template anymore. So we're going to take that template off of there. Okay. Now, in raising that panel, the next cutter we're going to use is our raised panel cutter. And our raised panel cutter here has a back cutter and a front cutter. When we cut our panel, you can see we're going to be cutting the back and the front at the same time. What that does, that gives me exactly the thickness I need to go right into that pattern cut, right like that. Okay? The other thing, whenever you're doing an arch or a curve, you must be in contact with the bearing. It's a freehand cut. So we're going to give you two bearings with our set, a large 1 1/4" bearing and a small 5/8 inch bearing. Those two bearings make the job a lot easier and a lot safer. It allows you to make two cuts, making the job easier and safer. Okay, so let's change and put our panel cutter into our router. And again, we're going to take our spanner wrench here, snug it up, and we're ready to cut. Now, the fence comes over here. What we have to do, two things. We're going to put this zero clearance in here instead of this zero clearance insert. And the zero clearance inserts do a lot of things for you. They make the job a lot safer because there's no dark hole. They also eliminate chipping and it makes the dust control a lot better. So we're going to take our straight edge on our bearing, pivot my fence flush with the bearing, lock it down, and we're ready to start cutting. Okay? All right. Now, remember when we took that template off of there, the 2 nail holes? We're going to place the 2 nail holes down, that way they're going to be eliminated. Now, the next thing, before we start cutting this, because this is a large cutter, it's the largest cutter on the market, 3.5 inches in diameter, we want to slow the speed of our router down all the way to 10 or 12,000 RPMs. Makes it a lot safer. The other thing we do when we start cutting this, we want to make sure the good side is down, like I said, and we're going to start cutting just like this. We want to cross the grain first in case there's any chip out. We create a chip out. We can always clean that chip out by cutting it secondly, going with the grain and eliminating the chip out. Now, the next thing we're going to do is cut that curve. Now, the first time anybody ever goes around a curve, they think it's going to be difficult. It's not. Because if you can take a handheld router and go around a curve like this, you can definitely do this. This is a lot easier because you don't have to control the router. And we've got gravity on our side here right now, okay? Now, when you start to do this curve, on the Roman curve, on the Roman door that we're doing, it's very easy. You come in here, make contact with that bearing, and just pivot your stock and make the cut. But when you get into the cathedral doors and the French doors and the other doors, the fence gets in the way. So I'm going to show you how to make this next curve cut here without the fence, because it's a freehand cut and you're doing some dipping and stuff with those curves, it gets in the way. So to do that, we have to eliminate the fence. We have to get the fence out of there. And what we're going to do is somehow we got to get onto the bearing while the bit is turning and then start making the cut. Well, there's 2 ways of doing it. A lot of people use the old-fashioned starting pin, where they stick the starting pin in here, come against that starting pin, and that gets them on the bit and they go. I don't like to do it that way. I like to use what's called a half fence. I don't want the whole fence, I just want a half fence. I'm going to create my half fence with a piece of stock like this. And what I'm going to do is line up with the bearing, and I'm going to get this half fence as close as I can to the bit, right there, okay? And I'm going to take some clamps and clamp that fence down, right like that, okay? Okay, we're still returning there, we're lined up. We'll put our second clamp right here. Okay. Now, what we can do is come into here. This is our fence. It gets us onto the bearing. Once we're on the bearing, we're safe. We come out here. Now we do our dipsy-do, whatever we have to do to make our curve cut. Then we'll come back, move the fence, and make the straight cut. So let's show you how that's done. We'll come into here. I'll turn the router on again, and we'll make that cut. We can move our fence back and make our final pass going with the grain. Okay. The fence is going to be rotated right back to my pivot point. Right there. We're going to, again, get that fence flush with the bearing, lock it down, and make our last cut. That's our whole panel cut with the first cutter. Now we're going to move the fence back and make our second pass, see? And the thing is, we don't want to, we could, if you're making a square door instead of an arch door, we would have gone directly to the bit with the small bearing, made our 4 cuts, moved the fence back to the small bearing, and made 4 more, and we'd have been done. But we had to have the big bearing in there to control taking that curve cut, see? If we'd have had the small cutter, small bearing in there, we'd have been forced to hog the whole thing at once. That's why we use the 2 bearing system, but only when we're doing an arched door. Okay, so now, let's say we've done 30 of them doors. We're ready to switch bearings, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to take your wrench here and lock up your bit, right like this. Take the nut and the back cutter off, switch bearings right there in the router. That way you maintain the same height setting for your second pass. But what I'm going to do here today is I'm just going to unlock that bit. Okay? Take the safety lock on it, take another cut here. I'm just going to switch router bits. This bearing, the small bearing is already on this bit. It's the same bit. It's going to drop into my rubber grommet. I'm going to snug it up, and we're ready to make that do the same operation all over again on our panel cutter here. Take our straight edge on the bearing, lock it up, and we're ready to cut with our smaller bearing. You can see, since I was using that Roman curve, that allowed me just to pivot that door like that. But on the other templates, you aren't allowed to do that. That's why I love the Roman curve a lot. Okay, our panel is all machined now. We are ready to take our stiles and rails and clamp our door together. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, we've got the 5 pieces to our door all machined. We're ready to assemble that door. And here's how we glue it up in our shop. We're going to take that stile, lay it on our bench at home, wherever. We're going to glue the rail, glue the stile, insert the 2 right there. Then comes our panel. Okay, no glue touches that panel. It has to expand and contract in there, and it has to float. So no glue touches the panel. Now, before we put that panel in there, what we want to do is stick a couple of our panel line strips in there. And what those panel line strips do, they allow that panel to expand and contract evenly, always keeping the panel centered right in the middle. So we're going to stick that into there. Okay. The next thing we're going to do, we also want to stick a couple of those, remember, down here on that bottom rail. Okay. Now, the next thing we do is we're going to put our top rail in. We're going to glue that, glue here. And when you spread that glue, stay about a 1/2 inch away, because you don't want any glue squirting out on these inside corners here. If you do, it's really difficult to get that glue out of there. And when you do, if you do get glue in there, and you probably will, what you want to do is take some white vinegar and water, mix it up 50-50, and it's just a great way to get rid of that glue. But also, don't forget, we want these little panel line strips on that top rail also. And we don't need them on the top now for expansion and contraction, but we do need them because we cut this panel a 1/4 of an inch shorter than it has to be, but to keep the same reveal all the way around. Okay? Our last stile comes into here, and again, you want to insert a couple of those panel line strips right like that, and that top rail comes into here like this. Okay, all you do is line up your top and your bottom. We'll go take that and stick it in our clamps now and glue it up, and our door will be ready to machine the outside edge. Okay, our door is dry and out of the clamps now. We're ready to do the next operation, and that's put the detailed edge around the outside of that door. Okay? And we're going to stick the next bit in, and that bit is our door edge bit. We also have to change inserts in our zero clearance on our fence here too. We're going to a smaller cutter. We'll put this one back in. Our fence comes over to here, drops into our pivot. Our straight edge comes with the bearing, lined up, and we're ready to cut. Now, we're going to take, and remember, like everything we do, the good side goes down. We're going to cut the end grain first. In case there's any chipping right here, we can always clean it up with the grain. And we go across the grain and then finish up with the grain. Our door edge treatment is put around the door now, and we have a finished raised panel door with the Roman curve. The last thing left to do is use the final bit in our set, and that's going to be used to create the drawer front. This is our drawer front now, and what we're going to do is use the final bit in our set right here to create the drawer front edge around here. Okay, that panel cutter, it's a little bit, it's a pretty large bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this insert here and put our panel cutter insert in there to give us a little bit more room. The fence is going to drop into our pivot point right there again. We take our straight edge on the bearing, pivot our fence, flush with the bearing, and we're ready to cut. Okay, again, we're going to put the good side down, right like this. Do the end grain first. If it chips, we can always clean it up again. Go with the grain, across the grain, and with the grain. Okay. We're going to turn the speed down just a little bit on this cutter here because it's a little bit bigger diameter. Okay, here's our drawer front is all done now. You can see where it gives you a nice little coved edge there, and it also radiuses that edge, makes it really nice and easy to sand it, no sharp edges. We've also got our arched raised panel door with the Roman curve done. Now, the last thing we have to do, of course, is sand these really nice and finish them. Then, after that, what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to create all the holes for our hardware on these two items. Okay, we're ready to drill the holes in our drawer front and in our door front. And to do that, we have a little jig here called the Easy Mark to do that. How it works is we take the drawer front, we bring it into here against that shoulder, and we find the center of this square, right? 15 3/4, 15 3/4, okay? We bring this sliding stop into there to lock it in case we're doing 4 or 5 drawers in a row. We can always relocate back to the same position. Our drawer front here is 8 inches. So I'm going to bring this scale up to the 8-inch mark right there. And that centers it this way. And this centers it this way. Now, we have holes that we can drill into. One, if we want one knob, or these here for our hardware with the 2 holes. So, and they're adjustable. Most of your holes are set where they're all the way in. It comes with a drill bit, an aircraft drill bit, 3/16 of course. We'll just take this jig, set it down like this, and drill our holes. And that quickly, we located the holes for our hardware, centered this way and centered that way. We can also use the jig on the doors. We'll bring this drilling mechanism to the center of the stile right here, okay? And what I'm going to do is locate the drawer front over on this side, okay? You determine where you want it. Let's say right there is a good spot. We bring that down. We leave this located here all the time now for all of our doors. Okay? Again, use the same location. And our holes are drilled right there, perfectly centered on our doors. All right, we're done with those. Now the next thing we're going to do is we got to come into here and create some holes for our hardware, for our hinges, for our European hinges. We'll show you how we do that next. Okay, here's our hinge boring jig that's going to drill those 35mm holes, plus 2 extra holes on the outside that are 8mm. We'll show you what those are for later. But the way this little jig works is called the easy bore. It just clamps onto the back of your door, right like this. And we're going to line it up on the bottom edge so we're flush right here. And it's got 2 cam clamps. So we're going to clamp down on it right there and right here. And that locks it in nice and tight, okay? Now, we're going to bring it in here. It comes with a socket. You stick this in a drill, and we're going to drill the 2 holes on the outside first of all, and these are 8mm holes. And they're spring-loaded. They stop automatic. Those are spring-loaded. They're set at the factory. Okay, the middle hole we're drilling is a 35mm. It's a little bit bigger diameter. Electric drill works nice, but we can still get it done with a battery drill if needed. Okay, that quickly and that accurately, we just drilled the holes for a 35mm hinge with the 2 adjacent holes to hold the inserts. Now, the hinges we have are little 35mm cup hinges, of course. And the 2 little nylon inserts on the outside, they get embedded into those holes, and that's how your hinge is held. To insert the hinge now, all you have to do, you don't have to screw it on anymore. All you have to do is take that hinge, set it into here like that, tap it with a hammer. And that quickly, your hinges are installed, just like that, ready to install. Now, we'll also drill a hole up here, place another hinge. What's nice about these hinges now, you can unscrew them, stain and spray your door, put them in and out as many times as you want. To install the hinges on your doors, we have another DVD showing you how to install cabinet doors, and that's in our cabinet making DVD. I hope you've enjoyed this time today as much as I have. We have thousands of people all across the country using these tools with great success, and I am very confident that you can too.